I stood in the fourth-floor conference room, where the cold fluorescent lights did little to ease the hollowness in my chest. In front of me was a thin folder bearing the company's new logo, one I'd never seen posted in the production area. They had changed, even our emblem, quietly, the same way they were preparing to shove me aside. "We truly appreciate your dedication over the years," said Linda from HR, wearing a rehearsed smile, while the man beside her, Drew Taylor, the newly appointed CEO who hadn't even been there 6 months, didn't bother to lift his eyes from his tablet. "The company is restructuring its operational oversight. This is the severance package, prepared for you." I said nothing. I opened the folder silently. 2 weeks to train my replacement, a one-time payment, and the rest of my retirement to be dispersed monthly. I closed it and stared at the gray-green of the table. 22 years, reduced to a few sheets of paper. Drew looked up when I didn't react. "The new guy starts Monday. He graduated top of his class in industrial management from UCLA. Very promising." Promising. Such a cold word. I had stopped dozens of pressure leaks with pure instinct, prevented injuries just by hearing a strange hiss from valve number 7. Now they were replacing me with a 27-year-old in a pressed shirt, spotless shoes, and not a single hour of real production experience. I left the room without another word. On my way to the parking lot, I passed the factory floor, where the smell of machine oil and the hum of compressors used to be my daily symphony. A few old workers looked up as I walked by, their eyes full of silent questions, but no one spoke. Inside my truck, I locked the door and sat still. A 58-year-old man, just dismissed from the place where he'd spent half his life. I once thought I'd retire here. I once believed a man's worth came from his dedication and hands-on knowledge. But spreadsheets and buzzwords like cost optimization erased that in a meeting that didn't even last 10 minutes. Back home, I took off my work gear and tossed the keys on the kitchen counter. In the corner, my steel-toed boots, still covered in iron dust, sat untouched. I couldn't remember the last time I wore them just to walk, not to work. I called Bruce, my closest friend, retired last year. When he heard the news, he was silent for a long while. "They've lost their minds," he finally said. "What are you gonna do?" I looked out the window, where the trees stood scorched under the early Texas summer heat. I'll teach that kid everything he needs to know. But one thing's for sure. They're not going to learn what really matters in 2 weeks. On the other end, Bruce sighed. "They'll figure it out. Probably too late, though." I hung up, poured myself a glass of water, and stared into it. At this age, people say you should learn to let go. But what I lost wasn't a title or a paycheck. What I lost was a legacy. Something I spent a lifetime building, now being dismantled piece by piece by people who only know numbers. I leaned back in my chair, shoulders weighed down. The game wasn't over. They thought I was just another name deleted from their system. But I was still here. I still remembered every bolt, every horsepower, every warning screech they'd never learned to hear. And I knew time would speak for me. I started at Turisteel when I was 36. My wife was still alive. Our daughter had just started kindergarten. Everything felt like it was only beginning. But things went off track faster than I ever expected. Altura wasn't an easy place to survive. In the steel casting industry, a slight pressure miscalculation could drown the floor in chaos. I once saw a worker suffer third-degree burns because a pressure valve was installed backwards. From that day, I began documenting every process manually. Each valve, each cooling cycle, every inspection schedule, even when the company didn't require it. Back when the maintenance team had only 3 people, I voluntarily staggered the shifts to ensure coverage. When the floor expanded, I was the first to propose double-lock safety systems for Casting Zone 2, which eventually became a mandatory policy across the plant. No software prompted me to do it, just instinct. And the fear of witnessing another preventable collapse. No one ever asked how I could recognize the trouble in Crusher 4 just by its pitch, or why I made nightly rounds near the pressure pumps at 2 a.m. during the graveyard shift. They called it old man habits. But that very habit helped me spot a failing regulator valve just under 40 minutes before the system was about to blow. They didn't call me a hero. They just stayed silent and let me keep working. I never asked for a promotion. From operating machines, I taught myself applied mechanics during night classes, earned a risk management certification. 2 years later, I was trusted to train new hires, not because management appointed me, but because every rookie came straight to me asking, "Hey, where does the grinder usually jam?" They trusted the guy with calloused hands more than the dead side slideshow from the office upstairs. 6 years ago, my wife left. No long explanation. Just a divorce paper on the breakfast table next to a crayon drawing from our daughter. I was already shift leader by then. The job was the only thing that didn't betray me. I came in an hour early, stayed 2 hours late, and slept on site during equipment failures. Not for overtime, but because the house was too quiet, too empty. I once hung a photo of my daughter above the main electrical panel in the casting zone, right above the emergency stop button. A reminder, behind every switch is a family waiting for someone to come home. Not everyone understood that, especially not the suit-wearing managers on the 8th floor. 2 years ago, I rewrote the entire maintenance cycle for the heavy press system. Before that, inspections were done every 6 months. I proposed cutting it to 3 months and adding logs based on vibration and real pressure readings instead of software estimates. They pushed back, of course, but when the old system glitched only 2 months later, the manual I wrote saved over 10,000 pounds of steel from being wasted and 2 technicians from standing next to a blast that could have maimed them. The one thing the company never managed to quantify was how I felt each time I stepped onto that floor. The smell of scorched metal, the steady screech from conveyor belts, the flicker of light off safety goggles. All of it thumped in rhythm with my own heartbeat, like I was wired into every cog. No algorithm could sense when a pump was off, just by the rumble underfoot. But I could. I kept the factory running not just with knowledge, but with deep respect for every link in the system, from the smallest wire to the grimiest crew member. What chilled me wasn't being replaced. It was knowing the guy after me never bent down to feel a machine's hum, never shared a word with the front gate guard, never waited at shift end to see if the night crew needed a hand. Altura used to be a family-run company. People remembered a welder's birthday on third shift, sent gift baskets when a supervisor's wife fell sick, but things started to unravel when McNally Holdings sold it to Branton Equity Group. There was no welcome party, no introduction, just a company-weighty email. As of today, Altura is owned by Branton. Within 4 weeks, 2 senior engineers were gone. No clear reason, just some line about strategic workforce realignment. The maintenance crew was cut by 1/3. I noticed, but no one said a word. They even changed vendors. Switching from heat-resistant bolts we'd trusted for a decade to something that looked like it belonged on a bargain shelf. I submitted a durability warning for the new bolts, attached with comparison photos. No response. 3 weeks later, a blade in the automatic shaft cutter snapped mid-shift, nearly taking off a machinist's hand. When I brought it up during the engineering meeting, the plant manager barely glanced my way before saying, "No one got hurt, so that's good. Moving on." Then came Matthew Drake, a man in a light suit, neatly combed hair, around 45 years old. His title, VP of Operational Optimization, assigned by the new parent company. No one on the floor knew exactly what he did, but weeks later, shiny new charts appeared on the bulletin boards showing metrics like output efficiency, labor cost per unit, and equipment ROI. At the next all-hands meeting, Matthew took the stage with a polished smile. "We live in the age of data. Every decision should be driven by numbers, not gut feeling." I scanned the room. No one spoke. Some nodded. The rest looked down into their paper coffee cups. Not long after, I received an email asking me to review the entire maintenance process and propose reducing inspection frequency to align with industry practices. That line was highlighted in blue by Matthew. It looked professional, but had nothing to do with the realities of production. I replied with specific data, citing at least 8 cases in the past 3 years where routine inspections had prevented serious failures. The response was empty. "Thank you for your input. We'll take it under consideration." The following week, 3 new supervisors arrived from a trade college in Dallas. None of them had ever worked directly with heavy industrial equipment. They carried iPads, took notes using templates, and started asking questions that made my skin crawl. Is it really necessary to test the machine after every shift? Why not consolidate inspections into once a week to save time? I listened without pushing back right away, but I began documenting everything: names, times, questions, and operators' reactions. Partly intuition, partly because I'd seen the same patterns unfold at my uncle's plant in Kentucky, where a faulty pressure valve once landed 2 workers in the hospital. The turning point came when I discovered the workforce optimization plan they intended to implement: cut 20% of the maintenance team over the next 3 quarters, replacing them with short-term contracts. I sent a final warning. Matthew escalated it to upper management, but no one responded. Their path was chosen. It wasn't strategy anymore. It was a methodical teardown of a safety system generations had built. One Friday afternoon, I visited the casting area after hearing that the auxiliary cooling system had been shut down early to save energy. Standing in the heat of glowing steel and thick steam, I realized what they called innovation was nothing more than reckless cost-cutting. Back in my office, I opened my laptop and created a new folder: Branton_safety_report. I didn't know how far they planned to go, but one thing was certain: the longer people stayed silent, the worse the fallout. You don't need an accident to know something's wrong. Just observe the indifference cloaked in corporate language. He showed up Monday morning right on schedule. His name was Dylan Reese, 29 years old, light blue buttoned-up shirt, shiny leather shoes that didn't belong on a grease-stained concrete floor. He smiled politely and extended a hand. "I've reviewed the production manuals over the last 3 days. Looking forward to learning from you so I can take over efficiently." I didn't shake his hand. I simply pointed to the locker. "Grab a pair of safety glasses and steel-toed boots. We'll start with the floor. Reality matters more than charts." For 2 weeks, I led Dylan through every section: compressors, steam release points, dangerous couplings that had once sent a worker to get 6 stitches. He filled a leather notebook with detail after detail. Except the people. He didn't ask when he saw Ben limping from a herniated disc, nor did he notice when Marla left early after a mild heart episode. The kind of details that keep a system running don't live in technical reports. They live in eye contact, tone of voice, and human connection, which Dylan completely overlooked. On day 13, I overheard him and Matthew Drake chatting in the break room, unaware I was getting coffee behind the shelves. "I think if we reduce the night shift's inspection rounds, we can save nearly 30 man-hours a month," Dylan said while flipping through a spreadsheet. "The alert system is already automated. Manual checks seem redundant." Matthew nodded approvingly. "I like how you think. That's the kind of mindset that drives change." No one mentioned the alert system that delayed signals by 4 minutes just last month. No one talked about Line 7's welding machine, which regularly overloaded during cold spells. Something only veteran techs could sense. They were discarding wisdom like outdated trash. That evening, I called Jordan, the maintenance team lead. He had worked under me for 4 years, quiet, meticulous, never forgot a detail. I kept it short: track all changes, inspection schedules, substitute materials, denied requests. Even stuff not documented? All of it. Even hallway conversations. That same night, I messaged 3 others: Paul from the cutting section, Louise from inventory, and Anthony on 3rd shift. Each one had backed me through crisis after crisis. I didn't use the word evidence. I told them to preserve the truth. A week later, Dylan officially took over my role. On the day I handed over my keys, he said, "I've mapped out a KPI system for the first month. A few light changes." I nodded. No advice offered. He wouldn't hear it anyway. It took just 4 days for Paul to text me. They skipped the opening pressure check. This morning, the press shrieked loud. Tech team blamed cold weather. No checks, no repair. 3 days after that, Louise sent photos of the replacement parts bin. Oil seals downgraded to a cheaper type. Rated under 350 degrees, even though the casting zone hits over 400. I started building a master log. Date, time, affected area, personnel, and the nature of the change. Every row was proof that a once stable system was being hollowed out from within. Anthony called late one night. "Aaron, the hydraulic pressed warning light blinked for 3 minutes before anyone noticed. When checked, valve number 4 had already leaked. 5 more minutes and someone could have been hurt." I didn't sleep. The cracks weren't just in the steel. They were spreading through the minds of people who used to believe in safety. Dylan wasn't malicious. He simply hadn't seen the true consequences yet. The next morning, I asked Jordan to show me the adjusted inspection schedule. I pointed at a red note. "Cut inspection frequency by half in press area per operations recommendation." I asked, "Who signed it?" Jordan answered without pause, "Dylan Reese." Things were becoming clearer, but not complete. It wasn't time for a counterstrike yet. I needed more. One final push. Something they couldn't spin away. By the end of the third week after I stepped down, Jordan called while I was replacing a kitchen light bulb. His voice dropped low, as if someone might overhear. Main cooling pump and casting area went down mid-shift. The press shut down for 2 hours. They blamed a faulty sensor, but I checked. The hydraulic fluid's filthy. No one's changed the filter in over a month. I opened my laptop as soon as I put the drill down. A new spreadsheet was born. Log_Altura_2025. I logged the date, time, location, equipment, cause, and a note: failure due to extended maintenance cycle. 3 days later, Paul reported, shaft grinder misaligned by 3 degrees. Whole line shaking. Dylan cleared it to run. Night shift had to halt when blade shattered and pierced the control panel. No injuries. But one more degree. I asked for scene photos. Paul sent them. I zoomed in on the upper left corner, a thick layer of dust on the spinning shaft. That machine hadn't been inspected thoroughly in at least 2 full cycles. A minor detail, but enough to back up a confrontation. The following week, the backup electrical system in the automatic cutting area failed during peak hours. Louise texted me right after. "They're blaming city power, but I just overheard a text say the backup capacitor's been dead for a week. No one fixed it." I called Louise directly. "Record every conversation you can. Send me a screenshot of the capacity replacement request if it's still in the system." 4 incidents in less than 12 days. Each one blamed on external factors. No internal report of technical accountability. Dylan and his team were hiding negligence behind polished language and impressive charts. I needed leverage, something with legal weight, something corporate spin couldn't erase. After 2 nights of thought, I drafted a letter to the Texas State Industrial Safety Office. In it, I detailed every procedural change, staffing cut, maintenance delay, an incident, attaching photos, internal memos, and unofficial operation logs. 2 days later, a woman named Julia Chambers from the office replied, "Thank you for sharing. We'll conduct an initial review and may send an inspection team to Altura in the next few weeks. Your personal information will be kept strictly confidential." Aaron didn't tell Jordan or anyone on the team, not yet. If they knew, it would stress them out and lead to mistakes. He needed them to carry on as usual. Keep documenting, keep observing, keep following procedures without raising suspicion about what was happening beneath the surface. The following week, the 5th incident occurred. The feeder system for the cutting machine jammed mid-cycle, causing hot material to spill across the conveyor belt. Anthony called at 5:10 a.m. before sunrise. They ordered an immediate cleanup, no photos allowed, but I managed to snap 3 shots. Sending them now. Aaron opened his phone and zoomed in. The hot material had splashed onto the control panel, partially melting the plastic casing. If the electrical panel had ignited, power across the entire operations floor could have been knocked out in seconds. At that point, Dylan could no longer blame the equipment. Yet the official report submitted to the office by Matthew stated the incident occurred due to operator error during an incorrect cycle startup. Aaron scrolled through his contacts. Under emergency contact was a name he hadn't dialed in 7 years, Walter Stein, a senior compliance officer formerly with the National Safety Agency, now retired but still well connected in the industry. I need you to coordinate a random inspection. By the book, but truly thorough. Walter paused, then said, "Send me everything. If what you've got is real, I'll handle the rest." After the call, Aaron stared at a spreadsheet that had grown by 4 more pages. The only question in his mind wasn't, will they admit they're wrong? But, how much further will they go before it all collapses around them? The inspection took place on Wednesday at 8 a.m. sharp, after a supposedly surprise notice Altura had known about for 2 days. Inspectors from the Texas State Occupational Safety Commission arrived with long checklists and field cameras. Aaron wasn't there, but every report and image Jordan later sent resembled a stage rehearsal choreographed down to each step. Machines were cleaned like a showroom, Jordan messaged. All maintenance logs were freshly printed, not the originals. Staff were briefed and recited scripts. Anyone who deviated was pulled aside immediately. Anthony reported that the control panel in the cutting area, which had partially melted the previous week, had been replaced. The pressure alert system that had repeatedly malfunctioned now lit up like a showroom demo. When asked about the gasket replacement schedule, Dylan produced a perfectly printed report, fully signed, even though Louise confirmed that type of gasket hadn't been stocked in over 2 months. 3 days later, the preliminary assessment came back to the factory. It noted a few minor procedural lapses, none that affected operations. A few warnings were issued, but no formal penalties. Julia Chambers, the one who'd originally responded by email, also confirmed via private message, "We found no violations serious enough to warrant an extended investigation." Aaron sat in silence in front of his computer screen, staring at the folder of saved evidence. They erased every trace, or had been clever enough to fool a process that only looked at the surface. 2 days later, Jordan met Aaron at their usual suburban cafe. The frustration on his face was impossible to miss. After sitting down, he pulled a USB drive from his coat pocket. "You need to see this," he said grimly. A young tech named Caleb got his hand caught in the winding machine while loading raw material. The guard had been removed last week to improve visibility for the operator. He lost 2 fingers. Aaron's body tensed. What was the official report? "Operator error," Jordan replied immediately. "They made him sign a personal liability form in exchange for keeping his job and getting help with medical bills. His family couldn't afford to fight back." Aaron held the USB without a word. "Inside are internal emails between Dylan and operations," Jordan continued. "Caleb warned that removing the guard was against protocol. They ignored him. There's also a detailed spreadsheet on maintenance reduction costs by section, compiled by Matthew earlier this quarter. The goal was to slash technical budgets by 18%, regardless of the risks." Aaron thanked Jordan and left. That night, he opened every folder on the USB. The email threads included timestamps, digital signatures, and edit histories. The evidence was airtight. Every line cut straight through the principles he had built his career on. One exchange chilled him. "Dylan, I don't think we should skip the mid-shift inspection on the press. Matthews, remember, you were hired to innovate, not cling to the past. If something happens, legal will handle it." The next morning, Aaron sent the compiled documents to 3 places: the Federal Department of Occupational Safety, the Association of Engineering Attorneys, and the trade publication Steel and Power Weekly. Over 40 pages, forged reports, machine logs that didn't match real data, photos of Caleb's accident scene, and, most damning, a systemic plan to cut safety corner. He didn't expect immediate responses. He just needed them to receive it. They had to see. They couldn't pretend not to know. 3 days later, Claire Nichols, a reporter from Steel and Power Weekly, called. "I reviewed the documents you sent. This goes far beyond a single workplace injury." Aaron replied, "You haven't seen everything. I have proof substandard equipment was approved for production. But before I send that, I need to know, is your paper willing to publish if the other side applies financial pressure?" Claire answered firmly, "We've lost lawsuits before, but we've never pulled a story out of fear." Aaron closed his eyes. The gears were turning, not in the machines, but in the machinery of truth. Friday evening, Aaron gathered his old team at Bruce's house. a small place tucked behind oak trees on Longview's southern edge. No one asked why this location. Everyone understood it had to be quiet, off the radar. 7 people showed up, all who had once stood beside him through heat, steel, and shrieking machines. Aaron didn't waste words. On the wooden table lay a thick packet of documents, alongside the USB holding the latest evidence. Jordan glanced at the title, Q2 Maintenance Cuts, focused on forging and shaft press units. Anthony frowned at the internal email photos between Dylan and Matthew about removing the safety guard. Louise clenched her fists as Aaron recounted Caleb's call after losing 2 fingers. I don't blame anyone. I just don't want the next one to be my little brother. I need all of you to keep documenting, Aaron said. Not just accidents. Track output quality, material deviations, batch traceability. If a faulty product is produced, we need to know which lot it came from. Next step, the clients. Bruce stood up. What's your plan, Aaron? I'm getting the evidence out of Altura, he answered. They can't keep cleaning up behind closed doors and claiming the plant runs fine. Our biggest customer is Falcon Tech. They use Altura's steel components in high-stress turbine parts. If defects reach them, everything changes. The following week, Aaron called Hank Keller, Falcon Tech's technical director, and his former colleague from Kentucky. Do you remember the billet batch I helped test back in 2016? I asked. Never forgot, Hank smiled. That batch saved us from a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. I need to see you. It's about the quality of Alcura materials Falcon Tech has been receiving. We met at a cafe in Tyler. I placed a folder in front of Hank. Photos of pitted billets caused by underpressured compression, hardness readings that fell outside tech specs, and a production log from the pressing station, where Dylan had authorized skipping 2 start-of-shift inspections. Hank flipped through each page, his expression darkening. We just installed those components into 3 test turbines in Colorado. If there's an issue, the damage won't just be financial. I'm not asking you to cancel the contract, I said slowly. I just hope Falcon Tech runs an independent inspection on the latest shipment. Don't rely solely on Altura's certifications. Hank nodded. All right, but if we find any misconduct, we'll pull the orders. Exactly what I'm hoping for. When I got home, I sent an updated report to the Office of National Safety Oversight, with Falcon Tech's written confirmation that they'd inspect shipment. A246. The harder part was reaching Dylan. I texted him, if you want to talk in private, not at the plant, not over email, call me. The next night, my phone buzzed while I stood on my front porch. I want to meet, Dylan said. No one else can know, right? I met him at an old closed-down gas station at the Rayburn intersection. He arrived 10 minutes late, pale, eyes sunken. I can't control it anymore, Dylan blurted before I even spoke. Everything's unraveling. Every time I propose a repair or add a safety check, Matthew shoots it down. They want perfect reports, no matter what's rotting underneath. I handed him an empty USB. I need you to back up all correspondence with upper management. Production reports, especially denied maintenance requests, the clearer, the more complete, the better. I'll get fired. Maybe, I said, but you won't carry the blame for the next accident. They'll need a scapegoat, trust me. Your name's already at the top of the list. Dylan was silent for a long time. Then he gave a slow nod. 3 days later, I received a data dump, over 300 files. Inside was a report that had never been submitted. Heat buildup risk at press shaft, recommend 4-hour weekly downtime for natural cooling. It had been marked dismissed, unnecessary. I opened the final page. Dylan's signature appeared above the line, Lead Technical Supervisor Zone 3. I closed the laptop. I had what I needed. But I also knew the next price they'd pay wouldn't be in the technical budget. It would be reputation, lost contracts, shut down production lines. Their silence was reaching its final chapter. The call came at 6:17 a.m., unknown number, but I recognized the voice instantly. Aaron, it's me, Matthew. His tone was tight, like a steel cable stretched to the snapping point. We've got a major issue at the hydraulic press line. Line 3 went down just after midnight. This week's Falcon Tech order isn't finished. I said nothing. Matthew swallowed and added quickly, "We need you, urgently. The company is willing to pay $300 per hour if you come fix it." "I'll come," I replied, "but not alone. I need Jordan, Anthony, Louise, and Bruce with me. They come in under the same authority, no interference. And I need full access to the last 6 months of maintenance records." Matthew paused. "I'll make the arrangements. Just be here before noon." When my old crew and I walked into the plant, the air felt like the concrete floor was seconds from collapse. Technicians fidgeted, managers avoided eye contact. Dylan stood in the control room, sweat on his forehead, fists clenched around a folder, like it was holding up the entire building. "Start with the latest inspection report," I said. Dylan silently handed it over. The first page told me why they'd called me. Operating pressure had been rising for the past 8 shifts with no incident report. The secondary release valve had been swapped out for a substandard part. The heat sensor was disabled 3 days ago to reduce false alerts. The entire system had been running behind a mask of technical makeup until the main shaft fractured at 1:42 a.m. "We need to replace the entire third-tier valve assembly," I told Bruce. "Jordan, check the secondary shaft. If there's any sign of thermal cracks, we halt everything." Louise headed to the stockroom for spare parts. Anthony began dismantling the main pump assembly without needing a word. For 3 days, we lived inside the sound of broken machines, the stench of burnt steel, and data streams scrolling endlessly across screens. Matthew never stepped onto the floor. Dylan showed up once a day, gave a silent nod, and disappeared. No one from upper management asked a single question. They were just waiting for the outcome. By late afternoon on the 3rd day, the press roared back to life. No sparks, no alarms, just the steady, familiar hiss of breath returning after a long suffocation. I was rinsing my face at the outdoor sink behind the shop when my phone buzzed. A message from Hank Keller at Falcon Tech. "We've inspected the shipment. 13% of the components exceeded acceptable variance. All Altura orders have been suspended." Less than an hour later, Julia Chambers messaged, "The safety board will initiate a federal inspection. We have all the evidence you submitted. They won't be able to dodge this time." The next morning, the second-floor administration wing fell strangely silent. Matthew vacated his position by mid-morning. The memo simply read, "Reassigned." Dylan was demoted and replaced by someone from the Arizona branch. 3 days later, I was invited to a meeting with the new executive team. I was greeted by a woman named Amanda Reese, representing the corporation that owns Al. "We'd like to offer you the position of Chief Technical Officer," Amanda said. "Full authority over safety and maintenance policies. 30% higher salary than before, plus equity." I glanced out the window where Jordan was securing the replacement valve, Anthony was carefully rewiring the sensor cable, and Louise was checking the incoming shipment, each one working on tasks that were once dismissed as excess. "I'm not returning full-time," I said. "I'll consult 3 days a week, hourly. But I set the maintenance schedule. No interference from finance, no overlap from hollow KPI reports. If you want real performance, it starts with safety." Amanda nodded after a pause. "We accept." I didn't come back to prove anything, especially not for a title that was once stripped away so easily. I returned because the shop floor needs people who remember that beneath all that metal are real human hands. And if no one protects them, someone in a suit will always try to save one more dollar. But this time, the cost was collapse they could no longer deny. Aaron's story is a sharp reminder of the price we pay when profit is placed above safety and people. After 22 years of service, he was replaced by spreadsheets, but his quiet vigilance, documentation, and timely action exposed a decaying system from within. In real life, people like Aaron still exist, quietly upholding the true value of work, dedication, accountability, and the courage to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. What do you think about Aaron's actions? Should he forgive those who turn their backs on him? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful stories about family and life.